Susan Kelly woke up early that Saturday morning. The sun had just started to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. She stretched her arms and smiled. After working 12-hour shifts all week at Pinecrest Memorial Hospital, she finally had a day off. Susan had been a nurse there for 15 years. At 42, she was known for her kind heart and skilled hands. Susan decided to spend her free day hiking at Greenpoint State Park. She packed a small backpack with water, sandwiches, and a first aid kit. Susan always carried a first aid kit. It was a habit from her years of nursing. She drove her blue sedan to the park, humming along to the radio. The park was quiet that morning. Most people were still asleep or having breakfast at home. Susan liked the peace. She took the coastal trail that ran along the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The view was beautiful. Waves crashed against the rocks below. Seagulls flew overhead, calling to each other. Susan had walked for about an hour when she heard it. A cry for help. Faint at first, then louder. She stopped and listened. The sound came from below the trail down the cliff face. "Help! Somebody help me!" Susan ran to the edge of the cliff and looked down. About 30 feet below, a man lay on a narrow ledge. He was holding onto a rock with one hand. His other arm was bent at a strange angle. Blood soaked through his torn jeans. "Hold on," Susan called. "I'm going to get help." She pulled out her phone but saw there was no signal. The nearest ranger station was 2 miles back. "I'm hurt bad," the man shouted. "I don't think I can hold on much longer." Susan looked around. No one else was on the trail. She had to make a choice. Go for help or try to reach the man herself. The ledge he was on didn't look stable. If he fell from there, it was another 50 feet down to the rocks and water below. Susan made her decision. She found a narrow path that seemed to lead down toward the ledge. It was steep and dangerous, but Susan moved carefully. She grabbed onto roots and rocks as she made her way down. Dirt and small stones fell as she stepped. After 10 tense minutes, Susan reached the ledge. Up close, she could see how badly hurt the man was. His right leg had a compound fracture, with bone poking through the skin. A deep cut on his side was bleeding heavily. His face was pale from blood loss. "I'm Susan," she said, kneeling beside him. "I'm a nurse. What's your name?" "Peter," he said through clenched teeth. "Peter Grant. I was taking photos of the ocean when the edge gave way." Susan opened her first aid kit. It wasn't meant for injuries this severe, but it was better than nothing. She put on gloves and began to assess his wounds. "Peter, I need to stop this bleeding and stabilize your leg before we can get you out of here. It's going to hurt." Peter nodded weakly. Susan took out gauze pads and pressed them against the wound on his side. She used the straps from her backpack to secure the pressure bandage. For his leg, she found 2 straight branches nearby. Using her hiking socks and the remaining bandages, she made a makeshift splint. Peter cried out in pain when she moved his leg, but Susan worked quickly and efficiently. Her hands were steady, just like when she worked in the emergency room. "You're doing great, Peter," she said. "Just stay with me. Talk to me. Tell me about yourself." As she worked, Peter told her about his job as an accountant, how he loved hiking and photography. Susan kept him talking, knowing it would help him stay conscious. She checked his pulse regularly. It was weak but steady. Every few minutes, Susan tried her phone again. After an hour, she finally got 1 bar of signal. She called emergency services and gave them their location. "Help is on the way," she told Peter. "But it might take some time to reach us. They'll need special equipment to get you up from here." The sun was now high in the sky. Susan used her jacket to shield Peter from its heat. She gave him small sips of water. His condition was stable but serious. The bleeding had slowed, but he needed a hospital soon. 3 hours passed before Susan heard voices calling from above. Park rangers and emergency responders had arrived. They lowered ropes and a rescue basket. A paramedic came down to the ledge. "I'm Joe from Greenpoint Rescue," he said. "Looks like you've done an amazing job here." Susan explained Peter's injuries and what she had done to treat them. The paramedic nodded, impressed. "You saved his life," he said quietly. With these injuries, in this heat without treatment, he wouldn't have made it. Together they secured Peter in the rescue basket. The team above pulled him up slowly. Then it was Susan's turn to climb up, with help from the rescue ropes. By the time she reached the top, Peter was already in an ambulance. "Can I come with him?" Susan asked. "Are you family?" the paramedic asked. "No, but I'm a nurse at Pinecrest. That's where you're taking him, right?" The paramedic nodded, and Susan climbed into the ambulance. During the ride, she helped monitor Peter's vitals. At the hospital, she followed as they wheeled him into the emergency room. Her colleagues were surprised to see her. "Susan, isn't this your day off?" asked Dr. Bill Harris. "It is. I found him while hiking. He fell from the cliff." Susan explained what had happened while the emergency team worked on Peter. Dr. Harris listened and looked at the makeshift splint and bandages. "Excellent field medicine," he said. "You saved his life, no doubt about it." Susan stayed until Peter was taken to surgery. Only then did she realize how tired she was. Her clothes were dirty and torn from the climb. She had scrapes on her hands and arms, but Peter was going to live, and that was what mattered. The next morning, Susan arrived at the hospital for her regular shift. She went to check on Peter first. He was awake and looking much better after surgery. "My guardian angel," he said when he saw her. "The doctors told me what you did, thank you, isn't enough." Susan smiled. "I'm just glad I was there." She continued to her unit, ready to start her shift. But when she arrived, the head nurse looked uncomfortable. "Susan, Donna Wells wants to see you in her office right away." Donna Wells was the hospital administrator. Susan was confused but went to her office. "Come in, Susan," Donna said. Her voice was cold. "Sit down." Susan sat across from the large desk. Donna held a folder in her hands. "It has come to our attention that you administered medical care outside the hospital yesterday," Donna said. "Yes, to the man who fell from the cliff. He needed immediate help. You were not on duty. You were not authorized to represent this hospital in any medical capacity." Susan felt her stomach drop. "He would have died if I hadn't helped him." "That's not the point. You violated hospital policy. You put the hospital at risk of a lawsuit." "A lawsuit? I saved his life. And what if he had died while you were treating him? What if your field medicine had made his injuries worse?" "The hospital would be liable." Susan couldn't believe what she was hearing. "So what are you saying?" Donna's face showed no emotion. "I'm saying you're suspended, effective immediately, pending an investigation. Please turn in your badge." Susan's hands shook as she removed her ID badge. "This isn't right. Any medical professional would have done the same thing." "Perhaps, but hospital policy is clear. You'll be notified of the board's decision within 24 hours. Susan walked out of the office in shock. Her colleagues watched as she gathered her things. Some tried to comfort her, but she barely heard them. How could saving someone's life be wrong? That evening, Susan sat alone in her small house. The phone rang several times, but she didn't answer. The local news had picked up the story of the rescue. Friends left messages of support. None of it mattered when her career hung in the balance. At 8 o'clock, her phone rang again. It was Donna Wells. "The board has made its decision," she said. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately." After the call ended, Susan sat in silence. 15 years of service, hundreds of lives saved. All ended because she had saved one more life on her day off. As darkness fell, Susan didn't know what she would do next. She only knew she couldn't regret helping Peter Grant. Whatever came next, she would face it knowing she had done the right thing. She finally went to bed, exhausted from the rescue and the emotional day that followed. She had no idea that by morning, her life would change in ways she could never imagine. Susan woke up early the next morning. She had barely slept. The shock of losing her job still felt like a bad dream. She made coffee and sat by her kitchen window wondering what to do next. The morning news played softly on her small TV. They were talking about her rescue of Peter Grant. The reporter called her a hero, but Susan didn't feel like one. Heroes didn't get fired. She was about to take another sip of coffee when she noticed something unusual. A black SUV pulled up in front of her house, then another one, and another. Within minutes, 5 identical black SUVs with tinted windows lined her quiet street. Susan's heart began to race. Who were these people? What did they want? Men in dark suits stepped out of the vehicles. They looked serious and professional. One of them, a tall man with gray hair at his temples, walked up to her front door. Susan hesitated when the doorbell rang. After a deep breath, she opened the door. "Susan Kelly?" the man asked. His voice was deep and calm. "Yes, that's me," Susan replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The man showed her an ID badge. "I'm Agent Alan Murphy with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. May we come in and speak with you? It's about Peter Grant." Susan's mind raced. The FBI? What had she gotten involved in? Slowly, she opened the door wider and let Agent Murphy and a woman agent into her living room. The other men stayed outside, watching the street. "Ms. Kelly, first I want to thank you for what you did yesterday," Agent Murphy said as he sat down. "Saving Peter Grant wasn't just a good deed. It may have saved a case we've been building for 3 years. The female agent nodded. "I'm Agent Lisa Brown. What Agent Murphy is saying is that Peter Grant isn't just an accountant who likes hiking. He's our key witness in a major federal investigation." Susan sat down, feeling suddenly lightheaded. "What kind of investigation?" Agent Murphy leaned forward. "We're investigating a crime organization that has connections in businesses, banks, and even local government. Peter Grant worked as an accountant for one of their front companies. When he discovered what was happening, he came to us with evidence." "The accident on the cliff wasn't an accident," Agent Brown added. "We believe it was an attempt to silence him before he could testify." Susan's coffee cup shook in her hand. "Are you saying someone pushed him off that cliff?" "We're still investigating." "Exactly what happened," Agent Murphy said. "Peter was in protective custody, but he slipped away from his handlers. He told us he felt trapped and just wanted a day of normal life. We think he was followed." Susan thought back to the rescue. "There was no one else around when I found him. At least no one I saw. They probably thought the fall would kill him," Agent Brown said. "They didn't count on you being there to save him." Agent Murphy's face grew more serious. "Ms. Kelly, there's something else you need to know. We've been monitoring communications related to this case. Last night, your name was mentioned in a call between 2 people we've been watching." Susan felt a chill run through her body. "What does that mean?" "It means they know who you are. They know you saved Peter. And they're concerned about what you might have seen or heard during the rescue." "But I didn't see anyone. Peter just told me he was taking pictures when the edge gave way." Agent Murphy nodded. "Even so, you're now connected to this case, and with your very public firing from the hospital, you're easy to find." Susan stood up and walked to the window. The other agents were still outside, watching the street carefully. "So what happens now?" "We need to move you to a safe location," Agent Brown said gently, "just until we can determine the level of threat." "Leave my home? For how long?" Susan asked. "We don't know yet," Agent Murphy admitted. "But we have reason to believe you're in danger here. We've already seen a car circling the block 3 times this morning. People are watching your house." As if to prove his point, Agent Murphy walked to the window and carefully moved the curtain. He pointed to a blue car parked across the street. 2 men sat inside, pretending to read newspapers but clearly watching Susan's house. "Oh my God," Susan whispered. "Pack what you need for a few days," Agent Brown said. "We'll take care of the rest. You'll be safe with us." Susan moved quickly, through her house, grabbing clothes, toiletries, and important documents. Her hands trembled as she packed. Just 2 days ago, her biggest worry was covering an extra shift at the hospital. Now she was running from dangerous criminals. As she packed, Agent Brown stayed with her. "Peter has been asking about you," she said. "He feels terrible about what happened with your job." "It's not his fault," Susan said. "I would have helped anyone in that situation. That's what makes you special, Ms. Kelly. Not everyone would risk themselves for a stranger." 20 minutes later, Susan was ready. Agent Murphy explained the plan. "We'll put you in the middle SUV. Agents will be with you at all times. We're taking you to a safe house where Peter is recovering. We've arranged for your mail to be forwarded and your house to be looked after." Susan took one last look at her home before being escorted to the waiting vehicle. The neighbors were starting to peek through their windows, curious about all the black SUVs. Susan ducked her head as she got into the car, suddenly feeling like a character in a movie. As they pulled away, Agent Brown pointed out another car that started to follow them. "Don't worry, we expected that. The other teams will handle it." Two of the SUVs broke off from their small convoy and headed in different directions. Susan watched in the side mirror as the car that had been following them chose to follow one of those vehicles instead. "Where are we going?" Susan asked after they had been driving for an hour, leaving the city behind. "A secure location in the mountains," Agent Murphy explained from the front seat. "It's isolated, defendable, and comfortable enough for an extended stay if needed." Susan watched the familiar landscape disappear as they drove deeper into the mountains. The reality of her situation was starting to sink in. "Will I ever be able to go back to my normal life?" Agent Brown gave her a sympathetic look. "We hope so, Ms. Kelly. But right now, our priority is keeping you and Peter safe until the trial." "What trial? When is it?" 3 weeks from now, Agent Murphy said. "That's when Peter will testify about everything he knows. Names, dates, transactions. Enough to bring down a criminal enterprise that's been operating for decades." Susan thought about what this meant. 3 weeks away from home. 3 weeks in hiding. "What about my job, my career?" Agent Brown's expression softened. "We know about your termination. That's another reason we're concerned. The timing is suspicious. We're looking into whether there might be connections between the hospital administration and the people we're investigating." The idea that her firing might be connected to something larger had never occurred to Susan. "You think someone at the hospital is involved with these criminals?" "We don't know yet," Agent Murphy said. "But we're looking into it. The decision to fire a nurse for saving a life doesn't make sense unless there's more to the story." The SUV turned onto a narrow mountain road. Trees closed in on both sides, making Susan feel even more cut off from the world she knew. After another 30 minutes of driving, they approached a large cabin set back from the road. It was surrounded by a tall fence, and Susan could see cameras mounted on trees. "We're here," Agent Murphy announced as they pulled up to a gate. Another agent checked their IDs before letting them through. Inside the cabin, Susan was surprised by how normal it looked. There was a living room with comfortable furniture, a kitchen, and several bedrooms. The only unusual features were the security monitors and the agents stationed throughout the property. Agent Brown led Susan to a bedroom. "You can get settled here. There's a bathroom attached. When you're ready, Peter would like to see you. He's in the room at the end of the hall." Left alone, Susan sat on the edge of the bed. Just yesterday morning, she had been a respected nurse with a stable career. Now she was in hiding, caught up in something dangerous and much bigger than herself. Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly. This wasn't the time for self-pity. She unpacked her few belongings and washed her face. Whatever happened next, she would face it with the same courage she had shown on that cliff. People were counting on her now, not just as a nurse, but as a witness to something important. Taking a deep breath, Susan opened her bedroom door and walked down the hall to meet Peter Grant again, the man whose life she had saved and who had inadvertently changed hers forever. Susan walked slowly down the hallway of the safe house. Her heart beat faster with each step. She wasn't sure what to expect when she saw Peter Grant again. Last time she had seen him, he was being wheeled into surgery, pale and barely conscious. She knocked softly on the door at the end of the hall. A weak voice called out, "Come in." Peter was sitting up in bed, his leg in a heavy cast and raised on pillows. His face had more color now, and his eyes lit up when he saw Susan. "My guardian angel," he said with a small smile. "I was hoping they would bring you here." Susan walked into the room and sat in the chair next to his bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better than I should be, thanks to you." Peter reached out and took her hand. "Susan, I am so sorry about what happened to your job. This is all my fault." Susan shook her head. You didn't fire me, Peter. The hospital did that. But if I hadn't been on that cliff, if I hadn't tried to run away from protection, then someone else might have found you. Or no one might have found you. Susan squeezed his hand. What's done is done. Peter looked down at their joined hands. The agents told me you're in danger now because of me, because you saved my life. I'm a nurse. Saving lives is what I do. Susan tried to sound braver than she felt. Or at least what I did. For a while, they sat in silence. Then Peter began to explain everything. He told Susan how he had worked as an accountant for a company called Westside Investments. At first, everything seemed normal, but then he noticed strange patterns in the books, large sums of money moving through accounts that didn't make sense. Started keeping notes, Peter said. I thought maybe someone was stealing from the company, but it was much bigger than that. Peter explained how he discovered that Westside Investments was laundering money for a crime organization. The organization had connections to businesses, politicians, and even judges. When Peter took his evidence to the FBI, they put him in witness protection immediately. I've been living under a fake name for 6 months, Peter said. Always moving, always hiding. Last week I just couldn't take it anymore. I needed 1 day of freedom, 1 day to feel normal again. So you went hiking, Susan said. Peter nodded. I slipped away from my handlers. I thought I was being careful, but they must have found me. The last thing I remember before falling was hearing footsteps behind me on the trail, then a hard shove. Susan felt a chill run down her spine. You're sure someone pushed you? I'm sure. I wasn't close enough to the edge to fall by accident. Peter's hand tightened around hers. If you hadn't found me when you did. But I did find you, Susan said firmly. And now we're both here. Agent Brown knocked on the open door. Sorry to interrupt, but we need to talk about what happens next. She came into the room with Agent Murphy. They pulled up chairs to form a small circle around Peter's bed. The trial is in 3 weeks, Agent Murphy said. Peter, you're still our key witness. Susan, we believe you may have seen something important without realizing it. Susan frowned. But I told you I didn't see anyone else on the trail that day. Agent Brown opened a folder she was carrying. We found this when we searched the area after the rescue. She handed Susan a photograph. It showed the cliff where Peter had fallen, taken from far away with a powerful lens. In the corner of the image was a blurry figure in a dark jacket. This was taken by a bird watcher who was in the park that day, Agent Brown explained. He didn't realize what he had captured until he saw the news about the rescue. Susan studied the photo. I can't tell who this is. Neither can we, Agent Murphy said. But we think it might be the person who pushed Peter. And we think they might have seen you during the rescue. Which is why we needed to bring you here. Agent Brown added. Not just for your safety, but because you're now a potential witness. Susan handed the photo back. But I can't identify anyone from this. No, but if we catch the person, you might be able to identify them in a lineup, Agent Murphy said. And there's something else. He hesitated, looking at Agent Brown. What is it? Susan asked. Agent Brown took a deep breath. We've been investigating the hospital where you worked. Specifically, we've been looking into why they fired you so quickly after the rescue. Susan leaned forward. Did you find something? We did, Agent Murphy said. Gregory Phillips, the chairman of the hospital board, has connections to Westside Investments. He sits on their advisory board. Susan felt like the room was spinning. Are you saying he's connected to the same people who tried to kill Peter? We don't know for sure yet, Agent Brown said carefully. But the timing of your firing is suspicious. We think Phillips might have pushed for your termination to discredit you, in case you had seen something at the cliff. Peter looked pale. Again. This goes even higher than I thought. For the next hour, the agents explained what would happen in the coming weeks. Susan and Peter would stay at the safe house, protected around the clock. They would both prepare to testify at the trial. Susan would need to recount everything she remembered from the rescue, no matter how small the detail might seem. What about my life? Susan asked. My career, my home? We're working on that, Agent Murphy promised. If our investigation proves that your firing was connected to this case, we'll make sure you're compensated. The government has programs to help witnesses rebuild their lives. Later that evening, after the agents had left them alone, Susan stood by the window of the safe house. She could see agents patrolling the grounds. The mountains loomed dark and silent beyond the fence. She felt trapped, but also strangely free. For the first time, she had no patients to care for, no shifts to work. Just time to think. Peter wheeled himself into the living room in a wheelchair. His movement caught Susan's attention. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Susan shook her head. "Too much to process." "I know the feeling." Peter wheeled closer to the window. "When I first went into protection, I couldn't sleep for days. Everything I knew was gone, my home, my job, even my name. How did you cope?" Susan asked. Peter was quiet for a moment. "I focused on why I was doing it, on the people who would be helped if I testified. The families hurt by these criminals, the communities damaged by their greed." Susan thought about her patients at the hospital, the people she had helped over 15 years. She had always defined herself by her work. Who was she without it? "You're still a nurse, Susan," Peter said, as if reading her thoughts. "That's not something they can take away from you. It's who you are, not just what you do." Susan smiled at him. "When did you get so wise?" "When a guardian angel saved me on a cliff." Peter smiled back. "We're going to get through this. Together." Over the next few days, Susan fell into a new routine. In the mornings, she helped Peter with his physical therapy. As a nurse, she knew how important movement was for healing. In the afternoons, they met with the FBI agents to prepare for the trial. Susan went through her story again and again, trying to remember every detail from the rescue. One afternoon, while reviewing her statement, Susan remembered something. "There was a water bottle," she said suddenly. Agent Brown looked up. "What, water bottle?" "When I was climbing down to reach Peter, I saw a water bottle caught in some bushes. It wasn't Peter's. His was still in his backpack." Agent Murphy leaned forward. "Are you sure? This could be important." Susan nodded. "I didn't think anything of it at the time. I thought some other hiker had dropped it. But now we know. Someone else was there." Agent Brown finished. "This could be evidence." A team was sent to search the cliff area again. Susan's memory had given them a new lead. As she watched the agents hurry away, Susan felt a strange mix of fear and purpose. Her life had been turned upside down, but maybe it was for a reason. Maybe saving Peter on that cliff was just the beginning of something bigger than she could have imagined. A week passed at the safe house. Susan had grown used to the daily routine and the constant presence of FBI agents. She had even started to help cook meals for everyone, finding comfort in the simple task. Peter was getting stronger each day. His color had returned, and he could now move around more easily with crutches instead of the wheelchair. One morning, Susan woke to the sound of extra activity in the house. More agents had arrived overnight. She quickly dressed and went to the kitchen where Agent Brown was pouring coffee. "What's happening?" Susan asked. Agent Brown handed her a cup. "We found the water bottle you remembered. The lab was able to get fingerprints and DNA from it." Susan's hands trembled slightly as she took the coffee. "Did you identify someone?" "We did." Agent Brown's face was serious but excited. "The prints belonged to a man named Carl Davis. He works security for Westside Investments, but we've suspected for years that he does other jobs for them too." "Like pushing people off cliffs?" Susan asked quietly. Agent Brown nodded. "Exactly like that. We've been building a case against him for a long time, but we never had enough evidence. Now thanks to you we do." Agent Murphy joined them, his face grim. "We've got teams looking for Davis now. But there's something else you should know." He placed a folder on the table and opened it. Inside was a photo of a man in an expensive suit, shaking hands with another man. Susan recognized the first man immediately. "That's Gregory Phillips, the hospital chairman," she said. "Yes," Agent Murphy pointed to the other man. "And that's Victor Reyes, the head of the organization we're investigating. This photo was taken at a charity event last year." Susan stared at the picture. So Phillips is definitely involved with these people? We think so, Agent Brown said. And we found something else. She pulled out a document from the folder. This is the email Donna Wells, your hospital administrator, sent to the board about your termination. Susan read the email. It was short and direct, recommending her immediate firing for violating protocol. But what caught her eye was the timestamp. This was sent at 7:30 p.m. the evening of the rescue, Susan said. That's before I even came into work the next morning, before Donna even spoke to me. Agent Murphy nodded. Exactly. The decision to fire you was made before you had a chance to explain. And look at the recipient list. Susan looked closer. The email was sent to all board members, but there was a separate email address copied that didn't follow the hospital's format. That address belongs to Victor Reyes, Agent Brown explained. Your administrator was keeping him informed about your firing. Susan felt sick. People she had worked with for years had been connected to criminals. Had they been watching her all along? Had they known about her trip to the cliffs that day? What does this mean for the case, she asked. It means it's bigger than we thought, Agent Murphy said. We're not just looking at money laundering and attempted murder now. We're looking at corruption throughout the city, reaching into places like your hospital. Later that day, Peter joined Susan on the porch of the safe house. The agents allowed them outside for short periods as long as they stayed within the fenced area. The mountain air was cool and fresh. I heard about what they found, Peter said. About the hospital, Susan nodded. I still can't believe it. I worked there for 15 years. I trusted those people. Most of the staff probably had no idea, Peter said gently. It's usually just a few people at the top who are involved. But still, Donna Wells. I had dinner at her house once. She seemed so normal. Peter leaned on his crutches. That's how these organizations work. They put on a good face, they blend in. That's what makes them dangerous. Susan thought about all the patients who had come through the hospital doors. Had some of them been connected to this organization too? Had she treated criminals without knowing it? 2 more weeks until the trial, Peter said, changing the subject. Are you ready? Susan wasn't sure. The idea of testifying in court terrified her, but she thought about what these people had done, how they had tried to kill Peter, how they had taken her job away, how they had corrupted her hospital. I'll be ready, she said firmly. That evening, Agent Murphy called everyone into the living room for a meeting. His face was tense. We've got a situation, he said. Carl Davis has disappeared. We had teams watching his known locations, but he's gone. Could he have fled the country? Another agent asked. Possibly. But our sources tell us that Reyes is angry about the water bottle evidence. He doesn't like loose ends. Susan felt a chill. You think they might get rid of him? Agent Murphy looked at her. It's possible. These organizations don't tolerate mistakes, and Davis made a big one by leaving evidence behind. What does this mean for us? Peter asked. It means we need to be extra careful, Agent Brown said. We're increasing security here at the safe house. No one goes outside until further notice. That night, Susan couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Carl Davis, the man who had tried to kill Peter. Was he running for his life now? Or was he already dead? The world these criminals lived in seemed so far from the life she had known. She got up and went to the window. The moon was bright, casting silver light over the trees. In the distance, she could see agents patrolling the perimeter fence. They were like shadows moving through the night. A soft knock at her door startled her. It was Agent Brown. Sorry to disturb you, she said. But we just got some news I thought you should know. Susan wrapped her robe tighter. What is it? The hospital board called an emergency meeting tonight. They voted to reinstate you with full back pay and benefits. Susan was shocked. Why would they do that? Because Gregory Phillips is gone. He resigned this afternoon right after we brought him in for questioning. The rest of the board is trying to distance themselves from him. Susan sat down on the edge of her bed. So I have my job back? If you want it, Agent Brown said. Though, after testifying, you might want a fresh start somewhere else. Susan hadn't thought that far ahead. Could she go back to the hospital where this had all started? Could she trust her colleagues again? There's something else, Agent Brown continued. We've been monitoring communications between Reyes and his associates. They're worried about the trial. They know Peter's testimony will be damaging, but now they're also concerned about you, me, but I don't know anything about their organization. You know enough. You can place Carl Davis at the scene of an attempted murder. You can testify about the hospital connection. That makes you a threat. Susan understood what Agent Brown wasn't saying. Even after the trial, she might never be completely safe. These people had long memories and far reach. We have programs that can help, Agent Brown said, as if reading her thoughts. New identity, new location, new job. After the trial, if you want that option, it's available. Leave everything behind, start over somewhere new. The thought was both terrifying and strangely appealing. No more looking over her shoulder. No more wondering who might be connected to Reyes and his organization. I need time to think about it, Susan said. Agent Brown nodded. Of course, it's a big decision. After Agent Brown left, Susan returned to the window. The moon had moved higher in the sky. Time was passing. The trial was getting closer. Soon she would have to stand up in court and tell her story. Then she would have to decide what story she wanted for the rest of her life. In the room down the hall, she knew Peter was facing the same choice. Would he go back to his old life after testifying? Or would he choose to disappear, to become someone new in a place where Reyes and his people couldn't find him? Maybe, Susan thought, they could make that choice together. She had saved Peter's life on that cliff. Perhaps now they could help save each other in a different way. Build something new from the ruins of what they had lost. As dawn broke over the mountains, Susan finally felt tired enough to sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The search for Carl Davis, preparations for the trial, decisions about the future. But for now, in this moment, she was safe. And sometimes, that was enough. The day of the trial arrived with clear skies and a cool breeze. Susan stood in front of the mirror in her room at the safe house, smoothing down the navy blue suit that Agent Brown had brought for her. She hardly recognized herself. 2 weeks in the mountains had given her skin a healthy glow, but her eyes looked different, more cautious, more aware. Peter knocked on her open door, balancing on his crutches. His leg was healing well, but he would need them for a few more weeks. Ready for the big day? He asked. Susan took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. Agent Murphy gathered everyone in the living room for a final briefing. The security plan was detailed and precise. Susan and Peter would travel in separate vehicles, each with 4 agents. The courthouse had been secured. Plainclothes agents would be scattered throughout the building. Remember, Agent Murphy said, just tell the truth. Answer the questions clearly and directly. Don't let the defense attorneys rattle you. The drive to the courthouse took almost 2 hours. Susan sat silently in the back of the SUV, watching the landscape change from mountains to suburbs to city. It felt strange to see normal people going about their lives, getting coffee, walking dogs, checking phones. Their world hadn't been turned upside down. The courthouse was an imposing building of stone and glass. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras ready. Agent Brown helped Susan through the side entrance, away from the media. They know this is a big case, Agent Brown explained. The arrests of Gregory Phillips and Donna Wells made headlines. People want to know what connects a respected hospital to a criminal organization. Inside, the courthouse was cool and quiet. Susan was led to a small waiting room. She would be called to testify after Peter. I'll be right outside, Agent Brown promised. You're going to do great. Susan sat alone, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Through the walls, she could hear the muffled sound of voices from the courtroom. Peter was testifying now, telling his story, explaining how he discovered the money laundering, how he went to the FBI, how someone tried to kill him on that cliff. 2 hours passed before the door opened. Agent Brown looked in. They're ready for you. Susan walked into the courtroom on shaky legs. It was larger than she had expected, with high ceilings and wooden benches. The judge sat elevated at the front, looking stern and attentive. To one side sat the jury, 12 ordinary people watching her closely. And at the tables in front of the judge were the lawyers. The prosecutor, a woman in a sharp suit, gave Susan an encouraging nod. At the other table sat several men in expensive suits. Susan recognized Victor Reyes from his photo. He was handsome in a cold way, with perfect hair and a perfect smile that didn't reach his eyes. He watched Susan like a predator as she walked to the witness stand. Susan was sworn in, her voice barely audible as she promised to tell the truth. Then the questioning began. The prosecutor led her through her story step by step. The hike, finding Peter on the ledge, the rescue, her firing from the hospital, the FBI arriving at her door. And Ms. Kelly, did you notice anything unusual during the rescue that you later recalled? The prosecutor asked. Susan nodded. Yes. There was a water bottle caught in some bushes near where Peter had fallen. It wasn't his. Someone else had been there. And that water bottle provided evidence that led to the identification of Carl Davis, correct? That's what the agents told me, yes. The prosecutor showed the jury a photo of the water bottle, then a mugshot of Carl Davis. Susan confirmed that the FBI had identified him as the man who pushed Peter. And where is Mr. Davis now? The prosecutor asked. I don't know, Susan said, honestly. The agents told me he disappeared after they started looking for him. The defense attorneys objected frequently, but the judge overruled most of their objections. When it was their turn to question Susan, they tried to confuse her, to make her doubt her memories. But Susan stayed calm. She answered truthfully, just as Agent Murphy had advised. Isn't it possible that you simply made a mistake about the water bottle? One attorney asked. That it belonged to another hiker? No, Susan said firmly. Peter's water bottle was still in his backpack, and the FBI found fingerprints on the one I saw. Those fingerprints matched Carl Davis. After what felt like hours, Susan was finally allowed to step down. As she walked past the defense table, Victor Reyes stared at her. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes were full of hate. Susan felt a chill run through her body but kept walking, head held high. Outside the courtroom, Peter was waiting with Agent Murphy. He looked tired but relieved. You did it, he said, taking her hand. You were amazing in there. Susan squeezed his hand. So were you. Agent Murphy led them through a back hallway to avoid the press. The jury will deliberate now. It could take days. What do we do in the meantime? Susan asked. We keep you safe, Agent Murphy said. You'll go back to the safe house until we have a verdict. The next 3 days were the longest of Susan's life. She and Peter waited anxiously for news. They played cards, watched old movies, took short walks around the fenced property, anything to stay busy and keep their minds off the trial. On the 4th day, Agent Brown burst into the house, her face glowing with excitement. We have a verdict, she announced. Guilty on all counts, Reyes, Phillips, Wells, all of them. The judge handed down maximum sentences across the board. Susan and Peter hugged each other tightly. Relief washed over them like a wave. It was over. The people who had tried to kill Peter, who had taken Susan's job, who had corrupted her hospital, were going to prison for a long time. There's more, Agent Murphy said, joining them. We found Carl Davis. Susan felt her heart skip. Alive? Agent Murphy nodded. Alive and willing to talk. He was hiding in Mexico, but our agents tracked him down. He's agreed to testify against other members of Reyes' organization in exchange for a reduced sentence. So it's really over? Peter asked. They're all going to jail? Reyes and his top lieutenants are, Agent Murphy confirmed. There are still others out there, but the organization has been dealt a serious blow. That evening they celebrated with a special dinner. The safe house felt different now. Not like a prison, but like a temporary home. A place of transition between their old lives and whatever came next. After dinner, Susan and Peter sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. Agent Brown had given them each a folder earlier. Inside were their options for the future: return to their old lives, or enter witness protection. New names, new identities, new beginnings. Have you decided? Peter asked, looking at Susan's unopened folder. Susan watched a bird soar over the trees, free and unafraid. I don't think I can go back, she said softly. Not to the hospital. Not after knowing what happened there. Peter nodded. I feel the same way. Even with Reyes in prison, there are others who worked with him. People who might hold grudges. So witness protection? Susan asked. A fresh start, Peter said. Somewhere new. Maybe somewhere by the ocean. Susan smiled. I'd like that. Peter took her hand, his touch gentle but sure. Susan, I know we've only known each other a short time, and most of that time has been unusual. But I feel connected to you, not just because you saved my life, but because of who you are. Susan felt warmth spread through her chest. In the midst of all the chaos and fear, something beautiful had grown between them, a bond forged in crisis but built on mutual respect and caring. I feel it too, she admitted. So maybe, Peter hesitated, maybe we could start fresh together, as part of the program. Susan looked out at the mountains one last time. The sun had almost disappeared now, leaving a purple glow on the horizon. Her old life was setting, just like that sun. But tomorrow would bring a new day, a new beginning. Yes, she said, turning back to Peter. I'd like that very much. 1 month later, a real estate agent showed a middle-aged couple around a small house near the coast. The woman, with newly colored hair and glasses she didn't really need, admired the garden. The man, walking with just a slight limp, checked out the garage. They looked like any other couple searching for a retirement home. Ordinary, unremarkable. It's perfect, the woman said. Her new ID card read Mary Collins, but she was still learning to think of herself by that name. I agree, said the man, now known as Richard Collins. He put his arm around her shoulders. Just what we were looking for. As they signed the papers for their new home, Susan and Peter shared a secret smile. Their past lives were gone. The nurse who lost her job for saving a life. The accountant who found evidence of crimes. Those people didn't exist anymore. But in their place stood 2 survivors. 2 people who had faced danger together and come out stronger. 2 people ready to build something new from the ruins of what they had lost. And as they walked into their new home, they knew that some endings are really just beginnings in disguise.